Business world, people have ideas. They want to present those ideas to management to think about, okay, how can we get this project off the ground? What advice, based on your experience, would you give them about preparing for a project as an introvert?
Sure. So I think for me, I mean, part of my role right now is to be creative and to generate new programming or new events or new ideas to get alumni involved. So, so I'm constantly thinking of new ways of doing things or introducing new ideas. And for me to just go to my supervisor and say, oh, I got this great idea, and then just go through every little detail of the program would be hard for me because I always don't think that fast. So for me to really be reflective and to think through the project and how this could benefit us, I, tend to write all of that down. I include the goals, I include steps to success, who might need to be involved in addition to my office, and just kind of think through like the holistic program and what is needed. And then I just write all that down kind of in a proposal format. And then I would send it by email to my supervisor, maybe with a small narrative, just saying, I had this great idea. I've included information about the program in a document, and I'm looking forward to talking with you soon.
Okay, and so do you follow some sort of pro forma or something? Some sort of template?
I'm sorry. Templates? Not always. I mean, I kind of just use what is needed to get my points across. So let's say it's a new event idea. So, what are the steps that would need, like if there's a communication plan, I would include that, the audience, kind of what I hope to get out of it. And sometimes when I'm doing programs for students, there's always learning outcomes. So that would be included in the proposal too. So I mean, I guess I have a template, but I don't really have a template.
I kind of guess it's more in the head, really. It's like, yeah, these are the steps I have to follow through.
Yes.
Yeah. So then okay, so your supervisor looks at it, they go, okay, yeah, Jennifer, we can work with this. Do you then have to go and present that idea, or is it just most of your communication is through email?
I usually follow up. In most of my positions, I've always had either biweekly or one-on-one sessions with my supervisors. So I would include that on the agenda for our discussion. Giving them enough time to be able to read it through and think of questions they might have. And then it's a lot easier for me because I always have it in front of me. So if I forget what I might have written down, I always have the notes with me. And then I'm able to ask questions. One of my strengths is being able to think through and anticipating problems. So more than likely, before I submit that proposal, I've already kind of thought through what might either be their objections, or what might be an anticipated problem. And for the work I do, it's most always budget.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm always
most places it's budget, isn't it?
Budget.
And would you say the people that you work with, would you be able to say they were introverted, extroverted, combination?
I would say for the work I do, I work with a lot of extroverts. Because you think of event planning and working with donors and having conversations with alumni. I think a lot of extroverts are attracted to that line of work.
Yeah.
But they're always the ones that kind of in meetings are just talking without really any thought to what they're saying. So that's been a struggle for me because I often have to walk away and then come back. So I send a lot of emails after meetings and just say, oh, we were talking about this and now I've just thought of this and I'd like to share it with you. So I do that a lot.
Yeah,
But again, like you said earlier, it's kind of that squeaky wheel. So they're talking, the extroverts are talking in the meeting um, without any thought, but people are listening to them, where
yes,
they would probably view someone like me as just the person over there not saying anything. Um,
yeah,
so another technique that I've really kind of brought to the workplace, and this has really been in my last two positions, is when I get to the position, I sit down with my supervisor and talk to her or him about my communication style. And I let them know right up front that I'm an introvert. Um, I think early in my career, I kind of hid that.
yeah,
Like I wanted to pretend to be an extrovert so no one would know. But the more I've learned about it and then in doing some internal reflection and knowing that the skills I bring to the workplace are very positive, I'm not ashamed anymore. And I tell people right up front.
yeah. And do you feel that people know what introversion is, or do they just think it's somebody who's quiet and not socially confident?
For the most part, yes, what you said. So I always educate them. I was lucky enough to do my thesis for my master's program on introversion in higher education. So I have the facts and the figures to support it.
Mm. So, what were some of the key outputs from your thesis then on introversion in academia?
Well, it was mostly focused on students, but in higher education, especially here in the US, that there's this big push that students have to be involved and they should be busy all the time. And there's not really any place, any quiet spaces for them, typically on campuses. Just being aware that some of your students are introverts and they're going to need the downtime. They're going to need spaces to go and be by themselves, which is hard because more times than not, they have a roommate. So even if they go back to their room, they're not fully
Yeah, yeah,
alone. So just being cognizant of that. And also in the classroom, if you're going to have a discussion, an open discussion in a classroom, sending out the agenda for that discussion ahead of time so that the introverts can process that and be ready to have a discussion. Because I don't think introverts are really afraid to be part of a discussion, but they like to think and do their research ahead of time.
yeah. No, I mean that's what I found. I found a lot of introverts are. I've got some great ideas, but sometimes there's so much noise around them that they just think, oh, just let the noisy people get on with it. I'll interject when I
Mm-hmm.
feel it's something really important to me or I have a very different opinion. I'll put myself out there. But if people are kind of roughly in the same area, I'll just let them get on with it and kind of
Mm-hmm.
just observe.
Yep. I even actually interviewed a faculty member in my research, and she puts the information right in her syllabus up front to say that if we are having a discussion in the classroom and you have ideas afterwards, please feel free to email me and let me know your thoughts. So she, um, even though she's not an introvert herself, she was able to give that space for introverts to be able to follow up afterwards. And as people left the classroom, that wasn't the everything wasn't done at that point. They could still go back and think through what they were just
Yeah,
discussing and submit information after the fact.
yeah. And now we seem to be most of our time online. Do you think that's helped introverts with interaction, or has it kind of allowed them just to stay out of the way and not be observed?
That's a really good question. Again, for me, what I found is it's kind of the same. If I am participating in a meeting with no agenda, I tend to be quiet. Um, but if there's an agenda and I know what's being discussed and I've had a chance to think about that, then I'm fully involved in the conversation.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
But I imagine chat is probably used a lot because introverts tend to want to write rather than speak up. So I have seen an increase in a chat function that people are able to put their thoughts in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. I know. I think chat is a great source to allow people just to. I think even with 6 or 7 people in a virtual classroom, if they can kind of just enter chat, it's so much easier than actually speaking with even a small group sometimes. No, no, I agree with that. I guess the challenge is though, if introverts constantly remain quiet or they always say things afterwards, there's sometimes a negative perception of
Mm-hmm.
how are they contributing to this meeting if they're not saying anything. They're here, but they're not getting involved. So what value are they adding?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is definitely that something personally that I've overcome is I feel the need to contribute something at every meeting, even if I'm caught off guard. Um, I mean, I also say, yes, this is what I have to contribute to the discussion, but I also would like to think through other ideas.
Yeah,
So it's just, for me, it's something that I've overcome over time. I still definitely need my downtime, and I, prefer working in an environment where I have that time to think through things, but knowing, especially in higher ed where things are moving very rapidly,
yeah, yeah,
that's not always the case. So you need to think through. And I think that comes with experience because the more experience you have, the more things you're likely to know, and you can draw on past experiences too.
yeah. No, for sure. I mean, what would you say is the key skill that an introvert needs to have to increase their profile within a team, within a meeting? What would be the key thing that they would have above everything else? Is there anything you
Hmm.
could think of?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think just knowing your team members and how you all work together. So, we just did a strengths finder type thing. So,
Yeah,
knowing who you are and who the people you work with closely are and how you can, increase your team's productivity is helpful. So the knowing of it, but not, overcoming that fear that you're going to say the wrong thing. I think for me was the biggest thing. Um, but knowing if I said something and it wasn't really what they were looking for, that it was okay because it was my personal idea.
yeah. I mean, I love the thing you say about, you're sitting down with your supervisor beforehand to say, this is my communication preface, and also educate them
Mm-hmm.
about how you interact. I think
Mm-hmm.
for me, it's interesting. I've never had that conversation with any of my managers. It's kind of, you just get on with it. I hope it all works out in the end. But hearing that, you're
Mm-hmm.
thinking, I think going back some of the interactions I've had with people, I'm thinking, oh gosh, if I would have had that conversation, we probably could have got through meetings a lot faster because we wouldn't have spent forever just throwing ideas out, and you're just kind of sometimes saying something for the sake of saying something, which
Mm-hmm.
probably is not really adding that much value to the meeting, but you're just saying it because you feel you have to say it.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I really think, identifying an agenda or a topic ahead of time helps both introverts and extroverts because then the extroverts hopefully will take a few minutes to think and then they're just not talking to hear their own voice.
Yeah. Uh,
Yeah, and sharing information with my supervisor really came from someone who works in the same field that I do, and she actually created a template. It's an about me template. So she shares it with her team, and then she expects her team to fill it out. And so then they have this conversation right from the beginning about their different preferences and who they are as a person. And it's been valuable to me, and I thank her for that's the
mm,
great thing when people share their ideas, and it works for you even better.
So what would kind of some of the headings be in about me? Would it be I'm an introvert and some of your strengths, and what would you include
Mhm.
within that for somebody who's never
Yep, kind of
created
your
one?
values and, kind of what your goals are, either for the next year or the next 5 years, and some fun stuff like your favorite color or your favorite food. But mostly it's, your belief system and who you are as a person and how you want to be communicated with. Um, I'm trying to think through the questions, but yeah, it's more about expressing yourself as a person, because everyone is different. And if you have that basic understanding from the beginning, it makes the relationship so much stronger.
Yeah, gosh, you've got to really know yourself to be able to answer some of those questions yourself, haven't you?
Mhm.
Yeah, gosh, yeah,
Yeah, and I've actually, kind of worked on that over the last year. It's the lockdown has been a blessing because I've had that time to really do that kind of work. And I wish I could have done it 10 or 15 years ago, but here we are.
no, no, indeed. I mean, I work with sometimes people and I say, so what are your values? And they kind of going, not really sure. And if you ask them to say what their values are, they struggle with it. These people have been in work and business for years and years and they have no
Mhm.
idea. And then once you start identifying, they go, oh, yeah, they can see it, but they can't actually name it.
Yep.
Yeah, but yeah, I think, gosh, having people to report to me coming up and saying these are the values, these are the things that's important to me from a business, from a life perspective, and this is kind of what I want to do. You kind of have a totally different conversation then, don't you?
Mhm.
Yeah, and it kind of
You really
helps.
do. And I am a strong advocate for teaching that. A lot of like career development offices and higher ed here in the US are starting to add that, to do programming around kind of that introspection, that inner self that we don't
Yeah,
often take time. And, especially for business schools, that's got to be part of the curriculum going forward. Because if you don't understand yourself and if you can't set your own boundaries,
yeah,
that
yeah.
leads to burnout.
So yeah, because I do think that sometimes you see that is people perceive introversion as a weakness,
Hmm.
and it's kind of like actually they're great listeners. They have lots of ideas. They just share them in different ways.
Hmm.
And that power of listening can help teams move forward a lot faster than just talk, 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 do, do, do.
Hmm.
But you need both of them because if you're just
Yeah.
all introversion and thinking ideas and not planning, not taking steps, then you're just never going to get anywhere, are you?
No, it's true. And you think of, some of the leaders, I'm not real familiar with the UK, but here in the US, Eleanor Roosevelt was a first lady, and she was the idea generator. And then her husband, as president, was able to carry out,
Yeah,
as the extrovert, carry out a lot of her ideas. And, she was very valued for the ideas that she brought to the table that could move the country forward. And I know there was an article recently about some of the leaders who handled, the pandemic better than other leaders. And a lot of them were female leaders. So, it would be interesting to take that a step further to see, where they fall on the scale of introversion, extroversion.
yes, no, no, for sure. Cool, excellent. Brilliant. Well, thank you. It's been really good talking to you, Jennifer. We kind of haven't really spoken
Yeah, no,
to
this
each
was
other. We've got a
great.
few little email things, and that's about it, really. But it's kind of
Yeah,
great to
get me
get
out
an
of
insight.
my comfort zone.
No, I mean, it's nice to get an insight from, different perspectives, different cultures. And obviously, it doesn't matter what culture you're in, there's a lot of commonality.
Hmm.
I think where it'll be interesting is, if you look at some of the stuff that Jill does, she's in Asia in that area. And I think that's a totally different element of introversion, extroversion as well.
Hmm.
We're both in the northern hemisphere, and the US and the UK have a lot of similarities in the way we interact and the way we do business. Asia and the southern hemisphere have very different ways of doing it, and there's some similarities, but I think there's more differences than our similarities.
Definitely.
So it'll be interesting. I'm hoping to speak to Jill at some time. So it'll be interesting to see what Jill is, having both worked in the US and in Asia, what the differences are there and how she's seen the extremes between introversion and extroversion,
Mhm.
and whether that's influenced how people work, etc.
Yeah, no, her book was so good, and working in the field of baseball, Major League Baseball, where it's I imagine a very extroverted environment.
Yes.
For her to be successful is promising for us introverts going forward.
Yes, for sure. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure speaking to
Yeah,
you, and
thank you, Mark. It
it's
was
my
great.
pleasure. Yeah, and
All
have a
right, thank you.
great rest of the day.
You too.
Okay, take care.
Yours is
Bye.
almost done. All right, bye.